what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, guys, we're going to get into the weeds with the Xarcade. I've done so many videos on the Xarcade. I've brought mods. I've brought all types of cool things you can do to the Xarcade. But today we got to get behind the scenes. We got to get into the nuts and the bolts of the firmware. Because Xarcade, unbeknownst to probably a lot of people out there, they've been quietly putting firmware updates for this machine that is quality of life improvements. And I doubt that a lot of people out there are like me and they actually go on the Xarcade website once, twice a month just to see what Xarcade is sneaking out there to the public. And I have a couple of things that I want to go over with this firmware, because the Xarcade is a confusing device if you don't know what you're doing, and it could be daunting to do these firmware updates. And people have reached out and said, hey, I see what you're doing with it. Can you help me out? And so now I'm doing this video. It's just a little tutorial just so people can see how I use it and how these updates kind of get put out in the middle of the night. I suggest to the Xarcade team, love you, by the way. Oh, and I'm not affiliated with Xarcade. Everything you see on my channel is for free and for fun and for you, the community, because everything I do here, it's out of my own time, out of my own love, and it's to show how awesome these products are and what you could do with it that you might not think about. And so, yes, I go on the Xarcade website, I check the firmware out, and I found a new firmware, something that wasn't mentioned by Xarcade. No videos. So going back to my other thought, I think Xarcade, you need to go on your YouTube page and kind of show these things off. You're putting in so much work to make this product easier and more fun, and you know, the functionality is so cool, but no one knows about it. I'm the only nerd that's going out here at like 12 at night to check firmware updates. So here's what I wanted to do in this video. There's a couple of firmware updates that are specific to Pinball FX and Pinball VR and flat pinball of all kinds. And so what I wanted to do was talk about two of them in particular, because one of them that just came out July 16th kind of is specialized, and one that came out in January is not. I know that doesn't make sense, but let's get into these firmware updates so you can see if one of these firmware updates is the right one for you. That's the ultimate goal of this video, to see if you want to update your Xarcade to do more than it already does easily. And that's what the Xarcade team's trying to do, give you easier, quicker, better functionality than when you pulled it out of your box. And so here's the Xarcade, here's the page, and what you do is you go to customer support, and then what you want to do is navigate to the Xarcade software update, which is right here. And so here's where it gets crazy, because I had trouble updating my firmware. I reached out to the Xarcade. They shot out back to me real quick. We got it resolved, and now I kind of understand what's going on. So here's what you want to do. You want to go to the Arcade 2TV XR Tank Stick VR software. And here's the page, guys, with all this crazy firmware. Look, it's not really laid out, but I've been playing around with it. And I just want to go over a couple of them. And so the first firmware that I want to talk about is just this stock version. So this is basically out of the box Xarcade stock version functionality. So if you want to play your pinball VR and that's it, you want to use this just as a dedicated pinball VR with your MetaQuest, boom, you don't really have to do anything. You plug in your dongle and you're ready to go. Boom, goodbye. You can leave this video, you're done. But what if you want a little more out of your Xarcade? What if you want to use it for pinball on other platforms? Well, luckily for you, a few months ago, Xarcade released a new firmware, 2.23. And 2.23 basically takes your Xarcade, and for the PC, you could plug in like a Steam Deck or an arcade box or whatever, and this firmware will allow you to automatically map Pinball FX to the flipper buttons and to the nudge. And what this doesn't do, it doesn't mess with any other mappings for your PC. So this is what I did. I downloaded this update. I put it right on my Steam Deck. And I was able to play Pinball FX flat version on the Xarcade with no problems. And I was able to play every other thing I wanted to on the Xarcade. Buttons were mapped. Everything was good to go. Download this. Boom. Pinball's perfect. It's perfect as a controller. No issues. Buttons. Everything. So let's just say you had a PC or a Steam Deck and you wanted to play Pinball FX or Pinball FX3. You could just download this firmware and you would be ready to go. Done. And that's what I did for many, many months because this was the only one out there, right? As far as tweaks to pinball. And if you go out here and look, you know, that was pretty much it. And I was happy with that. That was amazing. That's all I needed. I do have a Switch, but primarily play my Steam Deck through the Xarcade, and it worked perfectly. Well, lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, they came out in the middle of the night with a new pinball update. And this update changes the game a little bit. This update now allows you to play console VR pinball on your Xarcade. So, what are we talking about? You got your PlayStation. First, let's start here. PC, PlayStation 4 or 5, Xbox One Series X and S, and Nintendo Switch. So, they released an update July 16th at 5:59 in the morning. That's when they modified it. That will allow you now to bring other consoles into your pinball experience. Now, previously, in order to do this, you needed adapters to hook up to these consoles. And through the adapters that Xarcade sells, you would be able to get this up and running. But this firmware update eliminated part of the adapter process. And so all you need, if you wanted this, and we're going to get into this, is a dongle. A little dongle from Amazon. Let's see here. It's not here. So let's go to Amazon. Let's go to my orders. And let me show you what you need. So you need this device right here. Before you needed this device plus another device. But now you need this device. This is it. So you purchase this device, download the software, plug that Brookman into your console, and then the Xarcade goes into that. Now, what does this do? So now, this allows you to, let's go back to here. Let's take a look at this. This allows you, what this firmware update does, it hard codes across all consoles the same button mapping. And so now your flippers will play the pinball, your nudge is here, and your buttons are now mapped differently if you want to play other things. This is a pinball only update. And I'm going to tell you the problems with it in a minute. So let's start at the top here. If you have PC Windows, you can now download this update and play this stuff. But guess what? You didn't need this. You didn't need this. You could already play this without the adapter. And this is kind of where some of the problems come in that I've encountered. And I'll articulate everything after we get to this other. But here's where the new systems come in. PlayStation 4 and 5 can now play FX3, FX, Pinball M, and Xarcade Pinball. Xbox One, same thing, and Nintendo Switch. So I have the full library of FX3 on Switch. So I was like, perfect. I bought this adapter, got it within a day, plugged it into my Switch, downloaded this firmware, updated the firmware, boom, it worked. Perfect. I was running Nintendo Switch FX3 buttery smooth on my Xarcade with just this $49 adapter. And so, how does it work? Where is it? Here's how it works. You have your Wingman XE2. Here's your cable going from your Xarcade. So your cable goes into here, into the XE2 adapter that you just purchased, I just purchased, and then it goes into these. And as you see what it did, this firmware update made hard coding into the system the same controls for these devices. So now let's show you how they visualize this. So here you go. So for example, PS4 and 5, here is your left stick, your right stick. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where I don't understand what Xarcade did. Because on the PS4, this is your left stick. But look what they did. They mapped the directional buttons over here. And your square, X, triangle, and circle over here. So that means if you want to play a non-pinball game, you have to use your hands. And you can't play like you normally would want to play. Same thing with the Nintendo Switch. I have tons of games on the Nintendo Switch. So when I didn't play pinball, I went to go play the Capcom Beat 'em Up. And I had to have my hand here and then my fingers over here. I don't know why they did this. Why couldn't you make these buttons go over here and then move these buttons over here? If you could hard code any button you want, Xarcade, there was no reason to map the D-pad over here and the buttons over here. Now, could you stand there and play with it? Yes. Is it ideal? No. But here's the biggest fatal flaw of this firmware update. This firmware update takes the PC and it hard codes the PC the same as these. So they put out a firmware update in January that made your PC work out of the box with FX, FX3, and all that stuff, right? But then if you install this update, it overrides that. And now the pinball is just like these. And what does that mean? It means you can't play your Steam Deck for anything other than pinball. If you do, you have to put your left hand there and then your right hand on the buttons across the Xarcade. Not ideal. I don't know why they did this. So essentially, they lumped in the PC firmware update with this console update. Up here, you can see. And they shouldn't have done that. They should make these, they should break this. They should fix, first of all, they should take the PC out of here. The PC doesn't need an adapter. It works without it. And the second thing they should do is, if they're going to make you use the adapter, change the coding from these buttons. Make these buttons over here. Make make the Nintendo Switch X, A, Y, and B over here and move this over there. I don't know why they thought it would be easier to code it this way. And so, yes. First thing is first. This is a pinball update, they're calling it. And for that, it works. Thank you, Xarcade. But just by changing one more thing, you can now use your Switch to play everything with just one adapter. I don't want to buy another adapter to play everything on the Switch. When you have it, you did it. Fix the buttons and put them over here, and we are good. So what I want to do is show you exactly what I'm talking about so you could see how Xarcade is mixing firmware updates when I go downstairs and boot this up. And I'm going to show you, first I'm going to show you how it works with the new firmware. Then I'm going to show you the Steam Deck, how it works right now. And then I'm going to roll back the other firmware and show you that the Steam Deck goes back to being a functional controller. And so you could see and understand for yourself which one you want to do. Now, do I love this? This is great for the Switch because I have all the tables, all 100 and something tables. Would it be better if they took the PC out of this and leave my PC functionality alone? Because you don't need a dongle for that. Why did you lump this in? It doesn't make sense. My Steam Deck out of the box worked with that other pinball from January. So, whew, I know this is a longer video, but we got to get into the weeds. We got to help Xarcade figure this out so they can make this easier. Now, before I go downstairs, let me leave you with a little Easter egg. A little something I just found literally on their website because, again, I come on here, I poke around. That's how I found the pinball kit video that I made that no one else did before me. Well, I found something else. Check this out, guys. I just found this. This is a pinball palm rest kit for Xarcade. What is that? Well, they modified this a week ago. No one's talked about it. This is a pinball kit that makes it more comfortable to play with palm rests. So what is in this kit? 2 palm rest adapters with clear gel tape pre-attached, installation instructions, and a link to models for home printing. Pinball players told us leaning on the side buttons made their hands sore and sometimes triggered buttons. These palm rests lift your hands off those buttons and let you naturally lean without discomfort. There you go, guys. World premiere here. I know you sat through 18 minutes, but if you did, look, you now see this little gel pad here that goes against so your hand rests instead of the edge. Here we go. And look at this. So the right side is there, and then on the left side, they have these buttons here that fit in place. So looks like we're getting a palm rest pinball kit. And so when you click on this to go buy it, they're not ready to show it. They're not ready to show it. But the firmware update or the listing is there. I found it buried amongst the firmware updates. Guys, come out here if you're interested. You'll see firmware updates get posted here. I really wish Xarcade would be more active on their YouTube, Facebook to show you how this thing works because they're doing great work. And as someone who plays my Xarcade every day, yeah, P-Chump, I play my Xarcade more than you. Oh, I love it. I love this thing. So now what I want to do is go downstairs and show you these firmwares in action. I'm going to show you the new firmware, and then I'm going to roll back and show you why the PC needs to be taken out of this firmware. And then I'll get you out of here. I know this is a very in the weeds video, but I've had a lot of people ping me about these firmware updates. It's very confusing. Well, I'm hoping this is a little less confusing. If not, then I made it more confusing. All right, let's go downstairs and check this out. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's try to get to the bottom of this. Here is FX3. connect it via the Xarcade by a little PC box, and here is the connection. And the first thing I want to pay attention to is this dongle does not work with the PC as Xarcade says it needs to be connected. So the first thing is this you don't need for PC, as I said earlier. So when you download the new pinball firmware update, it overrides the controls that you're already used to plugging in and playing, and it changes them, and I'll prove it right now. So this is the left joystick. This is moving the screen. Yes, that's what we want. But here's the problem. These buttons are now mapped over here. And so watch this. Watch when I hit this button.
My collection. Main menu.
And so now what you're seeing is
My collection.
it is moving these controls over here when in the past the controls were here and the pinball button still worked. Now with their firmware update, it erased that and it put the controls over here, and it still works with the pinball. So all they needed to do, and I'll prove it.
Single player.
So here's just a pinball game loading up. And look, I have to use this. Now the flippers work, but what this firmware update did, it nerfed the Steam controls that you didn't need the firmware update for. Now what I want to do is put on the switch and show you the same thing. And then I'm going to roll back the firmware update and show you that this, with the FX3 on Steam, the buttons get remapped here. So now let's put the switch and hook that up and show you that this is the same exact setup. Now the difference with the switch is you need this adapter for the switch. You don't need it for the PC. So let's get to the switch and check. Okay, now we have the Nintendo Switch set up the same way. And so let me just show you real quick. Now the adapter is plugged into the Nintendo Switch, and there's the hookup for the controller. And now you see that it works. But the same situation where the buttons is right on the right instead of the left. So now I've proven that their firmware update is exactly as intended. All the controls from all systems, whether it be the Switch, the PC, the PS4, 5, Xbox, are all the same. Now what I want to do is roll back the last pinball update and see if I can get my Steam controls back on this side. And then I'm going to test the Xbrook XE2 adapter back on the Switch with the old firmware to see if we can get the pinball flippers and get the controls mapped back here. So let me go roll back that update and I'll be right back. All right, so I just rolled back the firmware update to this pinball update, pinball 2_23. And watch what happens, ladies and gentlemen. The Steam Deck works. Let's get to the Steam Deck. Let's get back to Steam. Get the pinball and watch. The controls work. Ready for this? It works on this side now. I don't need that firmware update. And more importantly, the flippers work as intended. But does the Steam Deck now work if I go back and exit? So now let's go back to Steam, everybody. Let's go back to my library and let's just pick Crash. Oh, I didn't install it. So what do I have installed? I might not have anything installed except for this, but I've proven, ready? I've proven that these buttons are now mapped correctly on this with Pinball Update 2. Hold on, guys. Let this load, let this load. All right, there we go. So let's show you one more time. These are the buttons. Single player, works. And so now let's get out of here. And I'm exiting the game. So once again, that is the pinball update you need. 2_23 that will make your Steam Deck perfectly configurable already with Pinball FX, and it won't mess with your controls. So Xarcade, I just proven that you need to take out the PC version of your pinball update for the 223_3. You need to take the Steam version, PC version out of your update. All right, I hope this makes sense to everybody. I know this was a long one, but these firmware updates are confusing to everybody. Xarcade, you need a community manager. Hop on YouTube, make these videos so everyone can understand what you're trying to accomplish. All right, I will talk to everybody later.